and maybe kind of folks can introduce themselves in the chat and maybe what routes are of interest to them, so I can kind of speak to the routes that are most of interest. Certainly I can give some of the high level highlights, but there's a lot of material to cover and there's not going to be time to cover every single route. So if I can have an idea of kind of which either specific routes or parts of town you want to make sure that we have a chance to have some exposure to, I'd be happy to incorporate those. So
yeah, that sounds great. I want to give another minute or two before we officially start, just so that the rest of the group can attend. I mean, I'm hoping that we're going to be getting at least 3 or 4 or 5 more members connecting. But yeah, I love that idea, Melissa. One of the things I had in mind, a big focus I was thinking would be just what sorts of changes to the initial plans have come about already, just from the public feedback, and also just in general, what are some of the more interesting pieces of feedback from the public. But again, we can talk about what we want to talk about once we get more of the members. Wait, did you see? Len, did you see any emails that I might have missed for folks saying they can't make it? I know we're kind of in vacation season.
Well, Wig, I mean, probably will come back. Brian, we don't know about Brian because his new parental roles. Craig is usually late, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on his name right now. Jacob's usually late, and so that would be all that I would be expecting at this point.
I usually expect Karen, and Carl lately has been.
Carl's very sporadic. Very sporadic. Yep. I mean, I would never bet on Carl in that meeting. So that's about it.
And let's see if we can get reattached, and then we'll start things off, because I consider Melissa's time to be sacred, valuable, and all of those adjectives. While we're waiting for at least Wig to come back, Roger, since this is your first time with us, do you want to just say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us what kinds of things you're doing lately? Since we know you're with CTPS, but it's your first time here, so
sure,
feel free to share.
I was brought on to CTPS in October of 2019, and since just about that time, supervise the folks who go out in the field to collect field data. So I'm a part-time worker who supervises the other part-time workers who go out in the field to collect data. And I do some other things for them on the side, but that's my primary task. And I'm really excited to hear what you folks talk about tonight.
Very cool. I'm just curious, what sort of what size team do you have right now? Is it?
Let's see.
A handful or huge?
I'd say there are 6 or 7 people who have been active in at least the last month or so.
That's pretty good. Are they volunteers or paid hourly? I mean, how does that work for
paid hourly? Accounting? Correct, paid hourly.
Very good. Do you ever find that it's hard to get folks to do that, or is there just a burgeoning pool of people that you can pull on at any moment?
Generally, there is more supply of people to do things than there is things to be done. Occasionally, we get a little behind and we need a little more help than we have, but generally it's the other way around. More people than tasks available for them to do.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you've got easy access to people. That's great. And I see Wig again. Hey, Wig, I was just thinking, if you're still having trouble, if all else fails, you can try connecting by telephone. How's things sound to you now, Wig? Oh, and Carl, by the way, hi, Carl. How's audio for you? Because Wig was having some trouble earlier.
Clear to me, thanks.
Cool, and Carl, you sound loud and clear. By the way, Wig, you sounded fine when you were talking.
Yeah, I think somehow this new laptop is logging in twice. Sorry.
Like,
But it's
Doesn't-
okay for
doesn't
you
seem like
guys.
it, but
It's fine with
yeah,
us.
you sound fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting an echo. But as long as I'm not disturbing you.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, we're not
Do you want me
getting
to
feedback
send?
now.
Wait, do you want me to email you the telephone call-in numbers in case you want to do it by phone instead? Okay, well, we're at 10 after. We've got Carl and Wig. Melissa, again, thank you very much. Let's kick things off. Wig, do you want to start things off while I just make sure that no? Oh, okay. All right, well, I will officially kick things off and say welcome everybody to the June 28th. Oh, I've got the wrong agenda up. There we go. Welcome to the June 28th Rider Oversight Committee meeting. This is our agenda on the right side of the screen. Our special guest tonight is Melissa DeLay, Senior Director of Service Planning. And I am thrilled that you could join us, Melissa, especially right in the middle of the bus network redesign project, which is probably, I don't want to, I can't even imagine, you're probably working 80-hour weeks. But then again, you were always working 80-hour weeks, it seems. Let's jump right into it. Do you want to kick off with any particular starting point, or just go right into what you'd like to share?
I'll jump in. And before we get started, I wanted to say hello to Roger. I'm so psyched to meet you. I've worked with you and used your products, your work products that the team provides. So it's very exciting that they're collecting data about transit ridership on buses and also most recently on the Green Line extension. So I just wanted to introduce myself and say hello and love your work.
Thank you so much.
That's what we do at The Rock. We bring parts of the tea together. It's not the first time this has happened. People have met each other. Here you have to have you work with each other. We work with each other, but not met each other. So, anyways, cool.
But thanks for the intro. So I'm here to talk about our bus network redesign. I have some kind of general slides. I'll go pretty quickly through them so that we can have time to talk about the map. And then also, we don't really have any kind of finalized changes to the map yet to speak of, but I can speak to some of the themes that we've been hearing as we've been going around and having outreach sessions, either in virtual public meetings like this, or with some of our other, station open houses and other formats. Oh no, I'm frozen. Let's see if my network is still working. Oh,
I think you're just frozen on.
Okay, got it. I'll keep talking.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I can hear you fine and see you fine. It's
Let
just
me
on.
share my screen.
You should have the permission, so go right ahead.
Okay, is it working?
Looks good.
Super. So just very quickly, what is a bus network redesign? We're looking to reimagine the MBTA's bus network to better reflect the travel needs of the region, create a better experience for current and future bus riders by changing things like routes and how frequently buses come, since the region has changed, but in many cases, the bus network has not. Bus network redesign is one piece of many different elements that are all part of the Better Bus project, formerly known as bus transformation. So there's lots of other things that are also part of that, whether it's fleet and facilities, thinking about electrification of fleets, thinking about bus priority, or even other things like what is the experience waiting at bus stops? How do we provide information in real time to passengers, whether, e-ink signs? There's lots of different elements that all contribute toward transforming the bus experience. And this is really focusing on the bus network, how we make a bus network that goes where people need it to go and that's easier to understand. So here are some of the things that we're looking, that we've heard from our riders based on our kind of preliminary rounds of outreach that we did. But generally people want service that's fast, frequent, and reliable. Those are kind of the most important things that we've heard from folks. They're looking for service that's simple and easy to use and goes where people want to travel and when they need it. what we're trying to do is really put equity first. This isn't just sort of like you draw up a network and then you do the equity check at the end and make sure that you're, checking the boxes. And that's kind of the old way of how we were doing things. But in this case, we were really starting with kind of building a new network from the ground up, looking at the travel demand data that we had access to from Streetlight, which is a vendor that provides location-based services, aka the cell phone data that's been anonymized, so it's not tracking any individuals. But then we were able to, prioritize trip making by low-income folks, people of color, and also we're looking at seniors and people with disabilities and people who live in households with few or no vehicles. Now, some of those aspects in particular, for seniors in particular, that's one case where we supplemented our travel demand data using cell phones because that group was underrepresented in the smartphone data. So we were supplementing with things like additional survey and other outreach to try to fill in one of those blind spots that we had identified. But in general, we're also looking at things like more frequent service in busy neighborhoods, more all-day service. We recognize that today's network is very commuter-oriented. So, we might have really great frequencies for those 9 to 5 office workers, but then the network becomes very slim, in the evenings or on Sundays. In many cases, routes might not even operate on Sundays. So we want to be a network that folks can use for a variety of trips and more of those all-day trips so that folks can, forego car ownership and feel comfortable making a variety of different trips with transit. And then looking to connect more places, including non-downtown centers. Our existing network is very downtown Boston oriented, and there have been emerging kind of regionally important employment centers and other destinations that have emerged, whether it's the Longwood Medical Area, Kendall Square, the South Boston waterfront, as places that a lot of folks are traveling to. That we think, historically weren't well connected into the network, but given the travel that we're seeing, really ought to be more connected to the network. And we're also looking for a network that's simpler and easy to use. Here's some kind of high-level stats about the system. The network that we drew up puts 275,000 more residents near high-frequency service. It adds 115,000 residents of color with access to high-frequency service and 40,000 low-income households with access to high-frequency service. And I definitely want to underscore this, is that we're not just proposing a sort of level-funded network with this. We are proposing that we want to do more with more, not just try to do more with less or do more with the same amount of resources. So this is actually 25% more bus hours that we've invested into this network. And that's kind of overall across the week. In particular on weekends, that's a 70% increase in weekend service. And just one of the kind of cases that we've highlighted is that 200,000 more residents gain fast and frequent service to the Longwood Medical Area, which was probably the most sort of underserved, regionally important destination that we saw in our trip making data. So here's a map that shows side by side. On the left, you can see today's key bus routes. And those are services that come every 20 minutes or better. And it's sort of the closest analog to what we're calling the high frequency network in our future bus network redesign map. And you can see on the left, there's a lot fewer lines. There's 15 corridors, and in the proposed network, we have 30 corridors. And note we're using the term corridors because in some cases, we have some high frequency corridors that are created by the overlap of 2 routes. So each individual route might not be high frequency, but the overlap becomes high frequency. But you can also see that there are whole municipalities that aren't served in today's network, especially you can see it most pronounced kind of north of Boston. Somerville and Medford and Malden and Lynn aren't on the map. Everett has like a couple bus stops, maybe at the end of the 111, but by and large, most of Everett isn't on the map. And we're proposing to add those locations. And even there's some, Boston municipalities, there's nothing in South Boston on today's high frequency map, nothing in the sort of Roslindale area on the high frequency map. And we're proposing that these should be, and you can also see that even in Roxbury and Dorchester and Cambridge and places that have historically been tied into the map, there's a lot more density of service to the map. So you can see it's not a grid. This is Boston. It's not going to be a grid, but as sort of close to a grid-ish type network with multiple overlapping sort of radial routes and some crosstown routes that sort of together make a network that allows, grids are very efficient and you can get from a lot of places to a lot of other places if you have a really rich grid-like system. I'll say grid-like because again, this is Boston. So, but you can see Longwood Medical Area only had 2 frequent routes in the before condition, and now it would have 6. Seaport and Kendall also get new frequent services. So there's pretty much our kind of top line headline is all about the high frequency service, though we do have a number of other changes to sort of simplify and restructure and reorient other services as well. In terms of getting better access to those regionally important destinations, Longwood Medical Area is probably the biggest change, with 200,000 more residents across the MBTA network who gain access to fast and frequent service that goes to Longwood. South Boston Waterfront has 180,000 added residents who gain frequent service to that location. Back Bay, 50,000, and Kendall Square has 58,000 residents who would gain access to Kendall Square. So I have a number of different maps, but actually before I jump into these, I was thinking I might switch gears a little bit. If you haven't already, I was thinking maybe you could introduce yourselves in the chat, and if there are particular communities that you're interested in seeing a little bit more detail, I can certainly speak to those. Wigs in the room, so I'll start with Somerville, and while I'm talking about that, you can add some other areas of interest in the chat.
Yeah, hey, can folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes, indeed, loud and clear. It's working great.
Yeah, so I can see the screen just great on my desktop, which doesn't have sound, and I'm on my handset. Melissa, can we send you proposed local maps and get some response from somebody just in a conversational way? I don't mean in this meeting, I just mean in general.
Yeah, we have, we're taking feedback, like if you had a route proposal, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend sending that in to one of our kind of outreach channels. You can see those on mbta.com/BNRD. So that those all get logged. Maybe you could copy me at the same time.
Okay,
just,
we'll do. Yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll just add one other thought, and that is that in thinking about Somerville as opposed to the region for a second, I've been wondering, whether it makes sense to make a kind of anecdotal map in your head of like local things that local people use the T to get to, as opposed to the big regional magnets. So that's one thing. And when I send you kind of a quickly drawn map for conversation basis, and I'll send it to the website too that you recommend. So that's one question. Does it make sense for locals to think about just how good the local feature connections are? Notwithstanding that we don't have the data and probably math network skills that you guys all have who are working on this. And my second question is, and maybe I'll follow up offline on this too, and some of the folks here know because Len and others on the committee were nice enough to let me talk about it. But I've been especially worried on the bigger scale about the lower Mystic to Lynn recently, and not so much big things in Somerville. Because I feel like, we've done most of the big things. We have to do the small stuff well in Somerville now. But I feel like the lower Mystic to Lynn has most of the opportunity zones in the metropolitan area. It has an awful lot of the immigrant EJ, and the Blue Line is just not as well connected to some of the important destinations as, including perhaps Kendall. But I, unlike Fred Salvucci, who is obviously a almost lifelong legend who we all respect, I'm more concerned about that whole group of EJ neighborhoods north of the lower Mystic being connected in than I am concerned about Boston Blue Line connected to Boston and Cambridge Red Line. I'll stop. Thank you.
Thanks for that. So
does any of that make sense?
Yeah, maybe I'll start talking about Somerville since I found the slide for that. But I'm super excited to talk about some of our other changes north of, for example, Everett is really being transformed with some of the proposed changes we have here. So I would very happily talk about some of those other changes. In general, Chelsea and Everett and Lynn and even Revere and Saugus have a very similar story. So I can pull up some of those slides, and if folks have others that they'd like to see, I'd happily pull those up as well. Or if there's others that I don't happen to have slides for, these happen to be from the two most recent meetings that I'd done, so they were already in my on my computer. So I pulled these in, but I can also pull up the remix map if there are other routes that are of interest that I don't happen to have their slides available. And also, these are all excerpted from the public outreach materials that are on our website. So these may be familiar to many of you who kind of poke around and seen. We made these sort of explainer documents because it's such a large amount of information to digest. We kind of chunked it up into sort of specific either Boston neighborhoods, because Boston's just very, very large, or specific municipalities for kind of the urban core area. And then we did kind of lump together some of our more suburban locations that had fewer routes so that it had kind of a comparable amount of route changes. So you can see any of these. There's, I think, 35 different explainers at our mbta.com/BNRD website that you can find these about. So one of the things in general with Somerville, we were trying to restructure the existing service to make more frequent services, because it was just amazing that Somerville doesn't have any high frequency routes today. It gets very close to the 77 bus in Porter Square, but there are no high frequency buses actually traveling around in Somerville streets. And then also the other piece was that you can see right through the center of this map, I've shown the new Green Line stations. So there's the Union Square station that's already open, and then you can see East Somerville and Gilman and Lagoon and Ball Square and Medford Tufts that are slated to open later this year. So trying to say, in the context of a future Somerville where there is Green Line running around, is there a different way that we might structure service to sort of complement that so that we can maybe not duplicate the Green Line as much, and then use that to create better frequencies? And also, one of the other kind of big picture things that we're doing is also thinking about making slightly longer routes, so that today often, travel in certain areas, Charlestown, for example, forces everyone to transfer at Sullivan. Like, there are no buses that go through Sullivan today, and there are many connections that require, in some case, multiple transfers to get between different communities. So we were trying to look at how people are traveling, what those kind of most common through trips are, and also just kind of, if you compare the MBTA's bus routes to some, bus routes in some of our peer agencies, in terms of like how long buses are driving for a one-way trip, like we tend to be at the shorter end of the spectrum. So we were saying, if we make things a little bit longer, can we get more folks a direct ride so that we know that the experience of transferring, especially when you have infrequent services, transferring can introduce a lot of unreliability into the trip. So kind of trying to cut down on the number of transfers, but then also trying to make more frequent services so that if there were transfers required, that they're better transfers because of having a high frequency to another high frequency transfer is a much different experience than like an every 30 to 60 minute bus transferring to another every 30 to 60 minute bus. So in general, you can see that there are a number of different high frequency routes proposed to crisscross Somerville. And many of these are now proposed to have multiple rapid transit connections so that we can think of a network that kind of complements our existing rapid transit. So you can see the T101. And by the way, anytime you see the letter T prefix in front of a bus route, that's our indicator, at least our working name. This might change later for anything that's high frequency. We wanted to, at first glance, whether it's on the bus head sign or on a bus stop sign, we wanted something that would be immediately obvious and or clear that this route is different than some of the other routes, that this is the kind of service that you don't need a schedule card for. We might change this. So we have some folks who are helping us with this question. We're also thinking, hey, we could call them the F routes for frequent, but F seemed to have such a negative connotation, and we wanted to riff off of the, take the T. It's one of our long standing kind of pet peeves. I don't know what you call it. When we say that we're taking the T, we don't always mean the subway. The buses are an important part of the transit network. So that's the thinking behind it. Whether this name sticks, that's sort of a working name, and we have some kind of branding folks who are going to help us dig into this question. But for now, anytime you see those thick blue lines with the letter T in the number, these are all of our high frequency routes. So you can see there's a bunch of routes crisscrossing Somerville with this new high frequency. So we have the T101, which is a modification from today's 101 bus. Today, the 101 starts in Malden, goes to Medford Square, and then works its way over to Broadway and ends at Sullivan. And globally, you'd say, why do we have a bus that has an orange line anchored at both ends of the route? What if we sort of split it up and organized it in a different way so that we could do some different things that connect to multiple different transit lines, so we could kind of stitch together places that aren't already stitched together with a heavy rail line. So this is proposed to start in Medford Square. So I'll say it's the lower half of today's 101 bus. There's a slight reroute to get closer to Magoon Square compared to today's route that turns onto Main Street. Would continue to serve Broadway like it does today. Instead of ending at Sullivan, it would keep going through Charlestown, passing through New Lechmere, and continuing to Kendall MIT. So this has two orange line connections, a green line connection, and a red line connection, and knits together. Now you could get from, Winter Hill part of Somerville. It knits together Somerville with Charlestown, which are very, very close together, but impossible to get to directly without a bus transfer today. And also it knits together Charlestown with Cambridge. Again, a lot of people are traveling between Kendall and Lechmere and Charlestown, but they're generally not taking transit because that's an extremely awkward transit trip. It would be like a bus and 2 subway rides to do that. So we see a lot of value in kind of stitching together Somerville and Charlestown and East Cambridge with this all-day high-frequency route that would be every 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week for the full 20-hour-a-day service. We also have a direct connection between Broadway and Everett. One of the 3 new high-frequency services in Everett would be the 109. So that's pretty much a north-southish spine through Everett, which today the 109 is not that frequent. So this would be a big frequency improvement. But today the 109 ends at Sullivan and we connect that service across by sort of merging it with the top half of the 86, I'll say. So that would connect Sullivan over to Union Square, Somerville, and over to Harvard and Cambridge. So saying, you know, everyone in Everett isn't just going to the Orange Line, they're also trying to get to Cambridge and Somerville, and this gives that more direct connection for folks to get to different locations with a single bus ride. So there's that one. There's the proposed T39. This one is looking at this is probably the biggest change to an existing key bus route. So you may be familiar with today's 39. That connects from Forest Hills up through JP, stops near the Longwood Medical area at Brigham Circle, and then today it parallels the E line into Back Bay Copley. We're proposing that instead of kind of paralleling the E line, that it would go through the Longwood Medical area, getting kind of better distribution to some of the different hospital facilities that are located there. It also gets folks from JP over to BU and the Park Drive area, and then would cross the BU Bridge over through Cambridge, through Central Square and up to Union Square, and then would take a left Somerville Ave up to Porter Square. The reasoning for this is twofold. So it gets JP improved connectivity to Cambridge and Somerville, which are some awkward transit trips, either going all the way into Boston with a transfer or multiple leg transfers with like the one bus or some other opportunities there. Or also getting folks from Cambridge and Somerville over to the Longwood Medical area, since this was one of those regionally important employment destinations that wasn't well served. So that's the philosophy behind this. I will flag, this is one of the parts of the network that has been brought to our attention at the Somerville meeting and at some of the other forums that we've been to, where the structure of how the 96 and the 39 come together, because the 39 sort of replaces the 87 bus along Somerville Ave. It does mean that there isn't a one-seat ride direct connection from Davis to Union Square, and that was one of the sort of origin destinations that was flagged as being very important in the Somerville or the intercore meeting, which included Somerville. So one of the concepts we're kicking around is, can we move the meetup point where the 96 and the 39 come together and slide that meetup location to be Union Square instead of Porter Square? That would preserve the direct connection between Davis and Union Square. And as it happens, City of Somerville is thinking about their roadway network and thinking about their streets. They have a lot of development going on in the area between things that are already under construction and things that are in the pipeline. So some, we initially said, oh, there's nowhere to turn a bus around there. We couldn't possibly, but we're saying, oh, well, maybe with some roadway changes, this is perhaps something that we might think about. So that's one of the pieces of feedback and that we've heard specifically from the Somerville area. And then I guess the other big Somerville theme that we'd heard was this. You'll see there is not an 89 bus shown here, so there's not that direct connection between Davis and Winter Hill. There's still a red line connection between Winter Hill or for Winter Hill folks with the 101 now to Kendall Square that I'd mentioned. But one of the things that was brought up was the importance of the Davis connection for those existing 89. So I think those were thematically the two big things on the Somerville feedback that we'd heard. I'll also flag there's some other high frequency changes that are Somerville adjacent. We have the proposed T7 bus, which would go from Sullivan through Charlestown. Separately from this process, Boston is looking at things like transit priority through a downtown corridor. They've had some outreach meetings already on the topic. I forget, they have a name. I think it's the North Station, South Station, something in that. I'd previously been calling it the Congress Street BRT, but they're also thinking about other things, not just transit, including like opportunities for better bike and transit facilities as well. So that could really work hand in glove with getting the T7 to be a successful route with, you know, better transit priority through the downtown Boston area. And it is really an interesting route. It connects both North Station and South Station, so you get all your commuter rail services, and it connects to every heavy rail line through the downtown area between South Station, State Street, North Station, Haymarket. So it provides a great connector service for everyone who might be able to come into the city regionally on the rapid transit network to then get, say, a connection over to the South Boston waterfront, because this would connect to Summer Street and eventually out to City Point at the opposite end of the route. So that's one other thing here. And then for the West Somerville, we aren't showing this as a high frequency corridor. I mentioned we do have some high frequency corridors that are formed by the overlap of two medium frequency routes. And 87 and 90 isn't one that we could get two-way all day coordination, but we do think that we'd be able to get one direction at any given time coordination. So because the 87 is proposed to be every 30 or better, and the 90 would also be proposed to be every 30 or better, we think we could get like inbound in the morning, you know, every 15 or better by keeping these two schedules coordinated, so that folks who are using anywhere from Arlington Center into Davis Square, we're hoping we'd be able to keep those two services coordinated between the 87 and the 90. So that's one extra piece on this one. Any other questions about, oh, well, actually, let me talk about one other thing. The 90 is not a high frequency route, but the 90 is proposed to get more prominence in our proposed network because of the way that, you know, there's no 88 service proposed in this particular map. Today, Highland Ave is served by both the 88 bus and the 90 bus. The 88 goes into Lechmere, and the 90 makes an Orange Line connection today at Sullivan, and also gets very near to Assembly. But in the future, we think that because of the layout of the Green Line serving much of Somerville and being very near to the Highland Ave corridor, that the 90 would become more prominent. So we're proposing to invest some of those 88 resources into making a better 90, and also extending the 90. Today it ends at Davis, but we're proposing to extend it out not just to Clarendon Hill, where the 88 today terminates, but continuing out even farther. The 90 would continue to Arlington Center, and at the other end, the 90 would continue over to Everett and Chelsea. So we were trying to create better kind of crosstown connections to get between Chelsea and Everett and Somerville, which are very, very close, and lots of people are driving between those areas, but again, very awkward transit trips for folks to take. So that's one of the other changes that we're proposing here. I'll also flag on the 90, we propose to only pull this into Assembly and not serve Sullivan directly and not serve Wellington directly, because this is really talking about connecting those inner suburbs together. And those are also just, Sullivan and Wellington are very large busways to be able to serve. We opted to kind of dial the preference to having only the one Orange Line connection so that we could prioritize faster through trips. But if you have thoughts about that, let us know your thoughts. And then the new 87 that's contemplated here is sort of taking the outer end of today's 87. It's actually continuing even farther into Arlington to serve Turkey Hill and replace the 67 bus. But then rather than kind of duplicate the portion of the 87 that would be served by where the T39 is drawn, or where the existing Green Line operates, it's proposed to kind of veer over to Mystic Ave and serve kind of the 10 Hills and the Mystic View housing over kind of on the East Somerville side of things. So it actually kind of knits together Mystic View with Davis in a new way that hasn't been provided previously today. Mystic Ave is served primarily by the 95 bus, which connects to Medford. So maybe I'll switch gears over to Everett, and then I'll see if folks have some other areas of interest. Oh wait, I see a hand. Len.
Thanks,
Len.
thanks, Melissa. Thanks to me. So, yeah, are you hearing people who don't live in Arlington express excitement about the routes that are now going deeper into Arlington, like the 90 and the 87?
It's mostly from Arlington that I've heard excitement about that, though.
Okay,
Well,
yeah.
I'm
'Cause we-
personally excited because I was just in Arlington last week, and I was like, man, if only there were a bus from Highland Ave to Arlington.
No,
Anyway.
I am, but I'll tell you, mostly what I'm hearing from Arlington people, are the losses, especially, for those who like taking, I guess there are a couple of routes that go to 87, to Alewife that will no longer be going to Alewife. I think one will be going to Davis instead of Alewife. So I was just wondering if when you talk in other regions, you hear people who go, oh yeah, it may be really good to be able to get to Arlington more easily. So because you're generally not going to hear that. You could hear that from people in Arlington who would like to go to these destinations, but I'm thinking that there are sometimes I see restaurant workers, and I know that they're coming from out of town because I see them on the 77, and they're usually going to Porter. And I'm kind of wondering, where are they going after that? And maybe they would be people who would really appreciate these newer routes. So that's more comment / question. You can answer that if you go ahead.
I have heard from some folks in Arlington who are upset about the loss of direct service to Alewife, though most of the people that expressed frustration were still transferring to the Red Line, which would remain as an option available at Davis. And we still do have some other options for, like, if folks work over near Alewife, we still do have some direct connections. I think most of the feedback that I'd heard was from maybe the conditions in the busway aren't as comfortable as they might be at Davis versus at Alewife. But I don't know. That's something that I'm hoping to unpack a little. So far, everyone that at least in the focus groups I'd been at, had primarily been transferring to the Red Line anyway. So I would have thought they'd be more indifferent. And then on the other side, I have had other folks who expressed excitement because, you can go to Davis on weekends and there's nightlife and things to do and other options.
And I think that's a strong argument. I like that one better. And the ones that I hear complaining about Alewife, it doesn't matter not having access to the Red Line. Yeah, some have said it's the conditions at Alewife, but mostly I'm hearing it's like they like being at Alewife because they are more likely to be guaranteed a seat at Alewife than at Davis. And my feelings are, well, you still gotta get a seat at Davis, and so rare is the time that you don't get a seat being at Davis. Maybe even before the pandemic, maybe there might be a few trains in the mornings, and that would usually be the case only if something had gone wrong, and so now you have a delay. And now the Red Line's packed coming out of Alewife, but that's not often the case. And so one other, this is a quick question because I just am a little bit confused when you said, I think it was about the 39, the one that is going to end at Porter, and they're looking at trying to make it end at Davis in order to give the Union Square to Davis connection. Is that the right number?
Yeah, well, thinking about not just the T39, but the combination of the T39 with the T96. So if you think of shortening 39 to Union but then lengthening the 96 also to Union. So for us, that's the same amount of resources. It's just a matter of sliding the connection points of those two high frequency services.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
that would give you the direct connection between Davis
Right.
and Union, and that would be now on the 96, the T96, if we were to implement that hypothetically.
I got you. Well, you mentioned though that you were finding it hard to turn things around at Davis.
Well, at Union,
At
we
Union.
hadn't drawn that on the map because
Okay,
Union is a very congested, tricky area. But
okay, I misunderstood.
there's other kind of roadway changes kind of in play that might create new opportunities for
So-
like turnover and layover locations, perhaps.
Gotcha. I was hearing Davis, and so I was misunderstanding. So I'm glad I asked. I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. So thank you.
No worries. Thanks for clarifying. And I know sometimes I talk fast, so
No, well, you know, it's user error usually. In my case, I'm the user using your voice, and my ears are working correctly. Thank you.
Stefan.
I don't know if this is the right time, but I'll just jump right in. I didn't realize about the proposed T7 that it's going to make, that it would make the orange, green, and blue. That's, and particularly the North Station, South Station. I guess the first question is, am I right that that would be the first single seat ride from North Station to South Station of any form? Because I'm racking my brain trying to think of any mode that's a single seat north to south right now.
But that's rush hours only and not particularly frequent. But this would be taking the Route 4 and making it even more frequent and making it run all day and making it run on weekends. And also adding the kind of local Charlestown and some of the local South Boston travel as well.
Okay, and having that connection of orange, green, and blue, is there any concern that people would overload that simply to make that connection between the different lines? Or, I mean, is that simply going to be mitigated by people not wanting to leave the subway if they're on the subway to go to a bus to get to another subway connection?
If someone were on the subway and it's just a matter of transferring to one other subway, they probably would do that. But for example, I work when I'm in the office near Dewey Square, which is right across from South Station, and it can be really awkward to get to where I am if I'm coming from the blue line, because I'd have to transfer kind of to the green or the orange line, and then also over to the red line. So often I just walk, and this is trying to make, you know, a better transit option for something that a lot of people are traveling to the Dewey Square area, or a lot of people are traveling to South Boston waterfront, and there should be a good transit option that's perhaps better than walking for the volumes that we're seeing of folks making that trip.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm particularly impressed by the idea of that T7. If there's anything that we can do to emphasize transit priority for that proposed route to make sure that would happen. I mean, I think that sounds like, out of all the downtown core, that sounds like a real slam dunk, just from what I'm realizing. And I know I'd heard it before, but it didn't really sink in until today. So thanks.
Definitely poke around on the BTD, the Boston Transportation Department website, and, you know, feel free to provide commentary and stay plugged in to their public process on kind of defining what those treatments work out to be, because this is definitely a very congested corridor, and having really high quality transit priority will make this far more successful.
Hey, Carl's got his hand up. I don't want to cut anybody else off, but I noticed that Carl's hand is up.
Oh, for sure.
Thanks. Let's see. So I have a specific Alston-Brighton question and a general timeframe question. Let me start with the general timeframe question. If I understand right, the planning horizon for this is 4 to 5 years, right? And that let's say the proposed map or something similar, the idea is that in 45 years, given funding, these changes would be made, right?
That's correct. So we're talking about a phased implementation over a 5-year period. So the earliest changes perhaps might be summer of 2023, next summer. And those would only be for either kind of things that don't require a lot of construction. So maybe if it's a matter of reworking schedules, but we're largely using existing stops or things that use the existing number of operators that we have. And then for things that take more capital construction, because we do have some things that would need larger layovers facilities or new bus stops to be constructed or new priority through, say, the Longwood Medical Area, for example. Those types of things would probably be, later in that 5-year implementation.
That makes sense. Thanks. So the specific question that I had that is related to the 64. And it looks like this is making a connection that doesn't exist and wouldn't exist until after West Station.
That's a great observation. So the 64 has been redrawn to show it serving the future West Station. And I recognize that the time horizon for West Station is probably a little bit over the 5 years, but we wanted to kind of put down on paper that we think that it would make sense to connect to the future West Station. You can see it's just north of the B line at Packard's Corner, kind of where the I-90 bend is. So we wanted to draw that. Now, obviously, if the station doesn't exist, we'll keep doing what we're doing today.
On Cambridge Street. Yeah.
Cambridge Street.
Okay. It was just the time frames didn't match up to me, and so I wanted to check on that. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. That was it.
Got it. And if you do have other thoughts on the Route 64, we also have proposed taking it off of Brook Street and that section of very awkward, uncomfortable roadway and having it go more through like the neighborhood by staying on Daniel Street. So I don't know. We haven't gotten a ton of feedback on that. So if you have any thoughts or opinions on that part of the 64, we're all ears.
I imagine you'll have a chance to hear about that on Wednesday at the Brighton Farmers Market.
Sounds like a plan. I won't be there, but our team will be.
Yeah. I mean, I live and used to take the 64 often, and it makes sense to me. That's the short version from my point of view.
Hey, and Stefan, you probably have more questions. I don't know how much more time we have, but Stefan is endless in his interest in all these things.
Well,
or Len.
I see his hand up, and so I'll go back after him.
Okay. My internet dropped for a second. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay. I think that was somebody saying that I should go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I lost all audio from you guys for about 10 seconds. Sorry about that. I was just thinking when Carl was asking about the time frame, it just struck me, being a Lynn resident and wanting to look out for Lynn folks with high bus service, at least until hopefully we can get the red-blue connector going. Just in general terms, Melissa, do you have any concerns about what impact the red-blue connector, if it finally happens, when it finally happens, I'll be optimistic. Do you have any concerns about how this current bus network redesign would be, I don't know, negatively impacted by a red-blue connector? I mean, and if the answer is no, we're not thinking that far out, that's a fine answer. Or if you don't have any concerns about the red-blue connector impacting this proposal, that's fine too. I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, it's funny, that wasn't on the current kind of planning timeline that it seems to be. Now, when we first started drawing this map, we've been working on this for a while. Now, it's also meant to be more easily updated in the future. So, if red-blue connector came in and different connections make sense, we have the methodologies and ways of looking at kind of how people are traveling, and we could make changes. But that wasn't necessarily factored in to how this particular map was drawn. And I still don't exactly know when we would actually see that. So this might be in effect for some time before like actual construction happens. It kind of depends on the construction timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes sense. So it sounds like you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying that part of the benefit of this bus network redesign project is that the entire planning process becomes a little more nimble. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, and I'm very excited at how we've been able to kind of come up with a process to look at how people are traveling with the cell phone data. It's a really rich data source and allows us to look at things not just based on census data, because often weird things happen. You look at the census data, which is fine in places where people live, but it doesn't always describe how people travel. And instead, we're able to see that there are cell phones that are kind of tied, their home address is say in a minority or a low income area. You can see that people are chaining trips together. They're traveling to kind of non-minority and non-low income areas too. So being able to chain together those different trips and see how folks might benefit in ways that would have been kind of discounted with our old processes, and like, oh, well, that person who's traveling in the financial district or in the Longwood medical area, oh, that gets pegged to downtown Boston's demographics or Brookline's demographics. Like, we're able to get a better understanding of how people chain together multiple trips, because they're not just going home to work, they're going home to the daycare, and then they're dropping off the kid, and then they're grabbing a bite on the way to the thing, to the, so how people actually travel is a very interesting question that I think we've been able to get a lot more interesting data. And also, hey, COVID happened, so maybe we'll be using these methodologies to see how people are returning to the office. If they're returning to the office, how many people seem to be, liking this hybrid thing. So I see two more hands. Len, you're first.
Well, Len, yeah, Len.
Sure. So a couple, hopefully short. For maybe the next phase of design, have you thought about how to design the system so as to encourage people to perhaps walk more? Because walking is healthier, and it could decrease the demand on the system. Because I've started walking, where I used to take the 77 a lot to Porter Harvard Square, and now I'm almost exclusively walk to Alewife, both there and back. It's just got to be really horrible weather for me not to do either. And so that wasn't an economic choice; it was more a health choice, and I enjoyed immensely. I could see actually making the corridor from North Station to South Station more walk friendly, as a alternative to not sure, let's connect them, but maybe not have the service level be so high, or maybe let's make it such that the service level doesn't need to be so high because people are walking and getting health benefits, and maybe even some retail benefit from having these stop shops along the way. So are there any thoughts along those lines?
That is pretty interesting. And actually, one of the things that we did when we were prioritizing demand, kind of before we had a network map, when we were just looking at the cell phone data, was we didn't want to compete with active transportation trips, lots of trips that might already be happening via biking and walking. So we didn't prioritize kind of trips that were less than a mile, or trips that were within the same kind of analysis zone that we had.
Right.
So there's already a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Now, that said, we've heard in the Somerville example that maybe we dialed down a little too much on the through trips versus some of those local trips. So that's something that I think we'll be thinking about.
Gotcha. And this is the last one. This really will be short. The Arlington meeting. I didn't bring it up, but a couple of people brought up taking the 77 into Lexington. I hadn't brought it up because I brought it up a number of times. And I knew that I had an opportunity here to. Is there really? Would you all even think about that? Running the 77 to
I
Lexington?
think there's a mismatch in the demand. So, which isn't to say that there's no demand. And actually, we're proposing new Sunday service in Lexington and
Yeah.
going up Mass Ave with the 62 bus.
Yeah.
But because it tends to be lower density,
Right.
just Lexington is much less dense than Arlington and Cambridge are. I think the frequency mismatch, and also would make it. We'd have a lot of empty bus seats for the Lexington portion of
Right.
that extended route. And then one of the other things, we've been trying to cut down on the number of variants. So sometimes we might have a route where, once an hour it'll go out to, say,
Right.
Lexington, and then
Right.
the other trips might continue to turn at Arlington Heights,
Right.
where we have the existing turnaround. But that always, it adds a level of complication to the schedule. And it also makes it difficult to keep things coordinated because if you think, we have evenly spaced buses on the section to Arlington
Right.
Heights, but every time you send a bus farther out, you kind of create a gap on the inbound
Yeah.
where that missing bus would have been. So
Right.
it creates sort of inefficiencies to
Yeah.
split like long buses and short buses.
Yeah.
So I'd be inclined to keep something similar to what we have with like a dedicated 62, but that still gets folks close enough that they could transfer if there were folks going from like
Right.
somewhere in Arlington trying to make that transfer trip. But I think
Yeah.
that's those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, great. No. It has put my expectations back where they were. So that's good. So I appreciate the straightforward answer on that. Thank you. That's it.
Right now, Wig.
So two things. First, I think the thoughts about active transportation are terrific, and that joint efforts that can be made in that direction would be great. I mean, obviously we're kind of blessed with what we're getting in Somerville for paths and along the Mystic, and so I really appreciate that, and it's a really nice coupling with need for continued assets to deep accessibility issues. The people who can't participate as easily in the active transport to the extent the rest of us can, that may free up assets for them. I mean, it's just a great conjunction of things. The other thing, your discussion of having the cell phone data reminds me of many years ago. MIT, some parts of MIT grabbed these massive data sets that other people wouldn't think to grab. And among other things, a decade or so ago, they got all the cell phone data from big cities in Italy, and they just animated the cell phone calls, and they could see all the congestion on all the highway networks, for example, around Milan, morning congestion, afternoon congestion. It was all animated. And that's, Milan is an awful lot bigger than Boston, I think, but it makes me wonder if somebody, maybe not your team, Melissa, but if somebody got that data set that was really good at animations, I would love to see an animation of all the data you have. I mean, it's anonymized, so it wouldn't be in an animation form. There certainly would not be privacy issues at the scale that you've done this. But that would be really eye-opening for a lot of us to see the region's patterns of travel on the T networks, and not just thinking about, I think more naturally about the things that I'm familiar with and not nearly as well about the other parts of the system. If I could watch that animation whenever I felt like it, I think that would give me a lot of education.
Perchance have a pointer to one of their outputs that I could show our team. If you did,
that would.
I don't know if it's on a YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, It's one of the big data guys in School of Architecture and Planning. One of these really well known among that community data guys. I'll look it up and send you the name. And that's better than me trying to talk until I remember it now, because it might take way too long. Thank you. But I'll send it, and ping me if I forget. Just 3 or 4 words. I'll find it.
Thanks for that. Let's see, Stefan, you're Lynn. I pulled up the Lynn map.
Yes, and to be honest, I have no concerns at all. I mean, there's actually not, if I understand it right, there's not a lot of changes other than what's in blue for a little higher frequency from Lynn down to Wonderland and Lynn out to the edge of Saugus, right?
So we have changed some things. There's a new high frequency corridor created from Central Square via the Linway. That's the combination of the 455 and the 442. So this is flipping the 455 onto the Linway, because today the 455 takes Route 107 and goes via the Common. So this is flipping the 455. And also there's no 441 on this map, which is more of a Swampscott thing. But again, in the vein of trying to simplify things, because it's like the 441 and 442 are really 2 variants of the same route, and one goes by land and 2 goes by sea. We're trying to simplify, and it does mean that there are some folks along Paradise Road that are within half a mile of other transit service, but kind of creating more consistent service, because sometimes when we have the 441 and 442, each branch might have every 75-minute headways during some of those very off-peak times. So instead saying that the 442 is going to be 30 minutes or better all the time and no more of these very long gaps, we see as being a big benefit to just legibility and simplicity of the network. And then sort of the northern side, you end up with the overlap of the 131 and the 426, kind of feeding into Central Square Lynn from kind of the Common side. The 426 becomes every day a Wonderland connection, instead of some days it goes to Boston and then some days it connects to the Blue Line at Wonderland, which means it would not be an express route. That's one of the other big themes throughout our project, is kind of dialing down. We're not eliminating every express route. There's still a handful, primarily to the western suburbs, where the transfer to like the end of the D line is still a really long trip time coming into Boston. So we did preserve some of those western suburbs, but for the most part, where we had rapid transit connections or GLX connections that were closer in, we've replaced many of those express buses with kind of better local connections that feed into the rail service. And then also the new 131 means that there's direct service to kind of Orange Line territory from Lynn, instead of everything at Lynn's network today has been really Blue Line oriented or kind of heading out even farther into the North Shore. Whereas this is trying to stitch together Saugus and Melrose and Orange Line territory with Lynn, because there are a lot of those suburb to suburb trips where people are traveling, and we wanted to serve those trips better. So I did want to flag those particular parts on the Lynn map.
I'm really glad you did, because I thought I had spent a lot of time looking at it, and clearly it had kind of not registered on me. So thank you for that.
And I did want to talk about Everett. I don't know if we have any Everett folks, but it just makes me very happy. So today, the only high frequency service in Everett is like a couple stops by the cemetery at the end of the 111. And in this new network, it's crisscrossed by 3 new high frequency connections. So I talked about the T109, which kind of makes a north-south spine all along Broadway. And would be very legible, and not just would connect folks to Sullivan like it does today with new high frequency service, but would continue even farther into Somerville and Cambridge. And then the Crosstown 110, which is the same route, the same path as today's 110, but it gets promoted to all-day high-frequency service. So today, late at night, it might be every 30 to 60 minutes. But this is a connection between Orange Line across Everett, across Revere, over to Wonderland Station. And there's a lot of trip making happening in that corridor. So very excited to kind of add this in to the suite of proposed changes. And then the other one, I'm actually very excited about the T104. Today, the 104 starts at Malden Center, goes down Ferry Street, and then ends at Sullivan. It's another one of these routes that connects to the Orange Line at both ends of the route. And we said, what if we unrolled the 104 and instead of having it connect at Sullivan, because we've already improved the Broadway connection with the T109 going to Sullivan, what if we pulled that across to provide better connectivity to Chelsea and East Boston and the Blue Line? So this is contemplated to be a new crosstown connector. We saw a lot of trip making happening with the cell phone data between Chelsea and Everett. Each of those, the most common trips from Chelsea were to other places in Chelsea, but the second most common trips from Chelsea were to other places in Everett. And then the opposite of that was true. Most trips in Everett were to other places in Everett. And the next most common destination was to places in Chelsea. So really strengthening the connection with a legible direct connection. Everett's all in, there's a number of new developments along 2nd Street. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I'm mousing over it.
Yep,
I don't know if that.
You can. Yep.
Oh, good. Okay, there's a number of developments along 2nd Street where, as part of the development's kind of permitting documents, they've secured right-of-way for future transit priority on that 2nd Street corridor. So we're very excited at the opportunities to kind of have that development go hand in glove with this new improved connectivity. And it also, this happens also in the context of 2 other changes. So the 112 bus today does connect Chelsea and Everett and actually Wellington Station with the Blue Line. And this is sort of like a more direct version because the 112, some folks have mentioned between the low frequency and the fact that it's a very indirect route because it has 2 separate spurs to serve both, you can see off the edge on the Chelsea part of the map, to serve the Admiral's Hill neighborhood and the Quigley Hospital Soldiers Home area in Chelsea. It makes for a very indirect, we've heard folks say that it's faster to walk from Chelsea to Everett than to take the 112 bus. So we're trying to, we still plan to serve those neighborhoods and connect to even more high frequency bus services than operate today. But we've sort of spun off the hills into sort of a local circulator type service so that we can really concentrate on making a fast, frequent connection for, we see a lot of trip making and we think that something like the T104 could be quite successful. And then the other project that's also going on at the same time as bus network redesign is the Silver Line extension. They're looking at opportunities to extend from the current terminus at Chelsea Station, right behind the Market Basket. And there are a number of different options being contemplated to improve service to Everett and better connectivity to Chelsea. So there are multiple options. I couldn't speak to all of those off the top of my head, but one of the concepts under consideration would be a Silver Line 3 extension to Malden Center. So if that were the recommended path, it's possible that this T104 route might sort of get combined with the SL3 so that it would be pretty much the same route from here until you get to the part where the rail corridor intersects with 2nd Ave, and then it would sort of shift onto the Silver Line right of way. You can see the Silver Line stations along here and replace this portion of the T104 route. And then that would also change the Boston connection. It would be, instead of Wood Island Station, that would be an airport station connection instead. Stefan.
Since you mentioned the Silver Line, I'm wondering, is there anything that precludes, I think the answer is yes, and a lot of things preclude it, but I just don't know. Is there anything that precludes the use of a conventional bus route on that stretch from the dedicated right away from Bellingham Square to Chelsea Creek just after Box District? Or I mean, or is it basically just by policy that that Silver Line right of way is just for Silver Line? I mean, is there a technical reason, like an
Well,
FTA
the
reason?
main, not an FTA or FRA or any type of. It's mostly just making sure that there's a place where, if there were overlapping routes, making sure that there's a place to turn around and a place to lay over where you're not blocking the route. So we'd have to engineer something like that. It doesn't exist yet, but certainly if this were something of interest, we could do construction. With bus network redesign, because it does have capital components, it's a little different than some of our earlier bus service planning exercises where we've just been like, what can we do with no capital? But some of these we're saying, well, if we could do a capital project to add a new layover here or add a turnaround here, that might unlock a potential new routing. So those kind of become part of the discussion now in ways that maybe those might not have been previously.
And then a quick follow-up about that 104. If it was put forth as you have it in the current proposal, the one we're looking at, would that 104 become like a best possible orange line to blue line connector for people who wanted to switch from orange to blue, blue to orange without going all the way into town?
We'd have to look at the travel times. Like if you were originating in Malden and say you worked at the airport, I think it would probably be competitive. But if I were already on an Orange Line train from like Oak Grove, I'd have to run the numbers to see, is it faster to get off and take the bus, or is it faster to go all the way in? So I don't know the answer to that.
Do you think that Logan Nash's team, like the customer technology team, will, I mean, this is sort of like trying to speculate about another team, I know, but do you anticipate that at some point in the future, that kind of level of prediction might be done? I mean, have you heard from customer technology about, oh yeah, hey, if you the bus network redesign folks, if you do these things, then we'll be able to supplement your plans for bus network redesign with these new predictive technologies. I think it's on our short list of next guests to have Logan Nash join us again, so we can ask him in person pretty soon.
Yeah, I haven't done that level of thinking on this, so I would ask that of Logan.
I will definitely do that.
Yeah. Well, and also I would say, Stefan, better though would be to get policymakers to do things that make people use the system the way that we think would be best to use it. And I know that I'm using strong words there, like make me, but the deal is that we can create policies that will encourage people to do certain things, and so I've always said, let's try to make the future that we want instead of just responding to whatever happens. And so yes, things will come up that we can't predict, but we should have a sense of where it is that we want to go, and really try to go there as opposed to going, we have no idea what's going to happen next. We're just along for the ride. So yeah, predictive technologies would be good, but more so would be technologies or policies that guide us to where we think we should go with the current level of knowledge, so that's all.
Wait, unless you want to jump in, or Carl, I'll throw another question out.
I'm good.
Carl?
I'll also flag that while we were on the Evermet, I just wanted to flag that I'm very excited about the new 90 connection to the Chelsea Market Basket, because that's like the the aisles are lined with gold at that market basket. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
that's kind of like the mothership example of
Yeah.
Market Basket.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think it's really great to have that 90 go to Chelsea, like go past, the orange line. I used to take it from Davis to Wellington, and I know it's changed now and it stops at Assembly, but yeah, I think that route could really do a lot of good, and that gets me back to me with. But I know you're gonna have a lot of complaints about things, but I think just really stick with that equity as the first point, and just really beat on that, because I think that's a really, really strong point, and I think it's great that we are trying to make the system more equitable and that benefits people who really need to use buses. It'd be good to see feedback from folks in those communities, how they're feeling about the plan. But of course, in the end, people are gonna vote with I want to say with their feet, but in this case with their butts, with butts in the seats. So we'll see what happens when it gets deployed. But yeah, the equity thing is really exciting and great. And one more thing, I love it when someone like you says, I'm excited about something that you planned. It's like, well, we got to do that. If the planner's excited, it's got to be good. So thanks.
That's a good point, Len. We should always make sure to ask our guests, no matter what the topic is, we should always make it a point to ask our guests, what is the exciting thing for you about whatever the topic is during our meeting?
Yeah, I agree.
You got me thinking now, Len, because and this is a question for you, Melissa. In terms of response from the legislature, and thinking, I'm thinking in terms of what you were saying about, yeah, this is there's not really a capital component to this. Has anybody from the legislature, no names necessary, or like even no regions even, but has any of the legislature seen some of these proposed changes and jumped out saying, oh wow, that would be huge, let's do that, but let's do it in a different way that would require a capital expenditure, and hey, I as a legislator am going to push for that? I mean, is there any kind of a discussion like that where you're maybe cautiously optimistic about some targeted funding, if that even can be done, to assist with particular areas of this plan that might need a capital component?
Well, actually, that's a good question. We've had many legislative briefings with either individual legislators or with the MBTA caucus and with others. And obviously there are folks who are more excited about this, generally in the kind of urban core areas where we're adding a lot more service. But there's also going to be a role for legislators on the kind of operating budget, I see. I mean, the 25% service increase is baked into our 5-year pro forma, but that sets up a discussion on how do we make this sustainable and how do we align our funding sources. So this is something that our general manager and our secretary are all in on, but it's not entirely within our control. So this is going to be something that we continue to have discussions about as we move forward.
Yeah, I think maybe the Rock can try to maybe talk to some of the gubernatorial candidates or people on their campaign staff and get like their take on this, and what they can do for the T in terms of more money. And I mean, I know we have a weak. I mean, structurally, the governor is a weak office, but but still, I mean, they have some influence. And I think they can influence the dialogue. Especially given that there'll be a big campaign, or a campaign at least, that we haven't had in at least 4 years for the governor.
I do have to duck out at 6:30 for another meeting.
Okay,
that's fine. You were very generous with your time, giving us 90 minutes. So yes, that's no problem at all.
Super. Any other last questions? There's probably room for one more.
This is Carl with a follow-up about the West Station mention. So you said you contemplated a West Station with a north-south connection possible. but only the 64 was drawn with it in Holston Brighton. Does that mean that other north-south connections through there didn't make sense, or is there something else going on?
Sorry, I missed the context.
So,
What did I contemplate previously?
so,
I don't know.
so you said the 64 was drawn with a West Station north-south connection in mind from Packard's Corner north. And my question was, were there other north-south connections through a West Station considered, but didn't make
Okay.
sense?
I get you. The only other one that we had looked at, and maybe you can kind of see this looking at the map, was the 66 bus.
Yeah.
But we actually did not recommend adding that one because there's such a huge demand for Union Square service on the existing 66. And also it's our expectation that probably Harvard or others will probably have some connecting services at West Station. So even if our 66 isn't going there on the map, we think there may be other opportunities to get travelers between West Station there. That's me reading the tea leaves. That's not any official statement of anything.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, Union Square, huge amount of ridership. And it was tough to make the call. And also because it's a high frequency route, we didn't want to do like half the 66s serve Union and half the 66s serve West, because that seemed like a recipe for confusion and
makes
adding
sense.
complexity. But
thank you.
I think we need to let you go.
Yeah. I love coming. It's like the
you.
band's back together. I love coming back to the Rock. Takes me back to the old days.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thank you so much.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll get Scott Darling here. Really bring it all back together. So, well, we love having you, Melissa. So thank you.
And for the record, let me say, Melissa, amazing work as always.
Yes.
I don't know what we would do without you. Please keep it up. It's so great. All of your work, your whole team's work, just phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right on.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks again.
Goodbye.
All righty. That was excellent as always.
The question I was going to ask, but I'm glad Carl got in and asked this question. It's like, how did that MBTA caucus meeting go? But I'll ask Sean Garberly about that. And so maybe I'll have him come to one of our CIF meetings. He might even want to come to a full Rock meeting at some point. But also, I think we talked about other members of the Rock asking their representatives, to come talk with us. So I guess at that last meeting, CIF meeting, you were thinking about me to get in your state senator, Stefan, to come.
Yes, I don't know if we should pursue that until we get through the vacation season.
Sure.
So I'm thinking, the earliest that I would want to invite Senator Crichton, who's my senator, and also the co-chair of the Joint Transportation Committee. By September sounds like it would be a good fit, and that's only it's only 3 months away.
His staff is good too. In my case, Garberly, I don't know any of his staff. I'd like to get to know his staff, but he always likes to just show up in person. But the staff can be really good, especially for Senate. And so they can usually get their ear more easily. And of course, they often have the ear of the person for whom they work.
Very good point.
They tend to know a lot too.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a good staffer for a legislator is going to be on top of everything.
Yeah.
No one person can know everything.
Yeah.
Now that includes the legislators.
Yeah. And they tend to be a little more easy with what they say too.
Yeah, but the flip side though is the legislator, if they like what you say, they can act on it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So,
But Stefan, I think September sounds like a good idea. I'm going to be at a environmental epidemiology meeting that will take a while because it's out of the country in September. But I would definitely try to tune into that if your state senator is there.
Oh, that's the benefit of all of this in Zoom.
Yep.
Quick time check. I've got 6:34. I was very happy that Melissa could give us an extra half an hour beyond what we had scheduled on the agenda. What do you folks think about next steps? Should we do a round of the subcommittee reports, or is there anything that's more pressing for the moment?
yeah,
No,
I don't
whatever you want to do.
see, I don't see anything.
Sorry,
pressing.
Glenn.
No, I was just saying. I mean, I don't have any new business. I mean, that's of any import, or particularly. I mean, the external meetings. Well, really, the things of interest have been the last network redesign meetings. Yeah, I did
I agree.
the meeting on fair evasion, and there was nothing groundbreaking in that. I mean, there was a lot of people were really saying we really need to do reduced fares, and some people needed to be disavowed of the notion that only people who have low income are the ones that evade fares. So, and the people who run the meeting they kept saying it's not only people who you perceive as having low income that evade fares, and so yeah, so that was that.
Yep.
So we could just do a quick round of, and I can be quick with mine.
Okay, if you want to go first, that's fine. I mean, I've got my notes from the other subcommittee ready to go, but if you want to, sure. And actually, yeah, this might be also good for Roger. I'm not sure, Roger, if you know our two subcommittees. If not, it's worth mentioning. We have a subcommittee on, as you can see from the agenda that's on the screen, capital investment and finance. Len and Brian, who's not here, he's on paternity leave, are the co-chairs of the capital and finance subcommittee. That's fine. I mean, I don't know to put words in your mouth, Len, but it's anything to do with money, whether it's money going in, money coming in, going out, big projects, small projects, operational costs. Is that a fair summary, Len, or am I not doing it justice?
Yeah, that's fine. That's pretty much what you need to do, money.
Okay. And then the other subcommittee is co-chaired by me and Craig, who is also not here tonight, where we're talking about the marketing aspect is essentially the communications out from the T to riders in both terms of communications. Well, that's another part of communications as well. Messaging, as well as ad campaigns, the issues that go into ad campaigns like wraps on subway cars, etc. And then of course the operations component is the elements of keeping the lights on. But that being said, Len, go ahead.
Sure. And then with Craig, there's always something to do with Mattapan. So there's always some prerequisite component dealing with Mattapan, and Craig will. Craig is proud of that. So it was it was an easygoing capital investment CIF meeting. The guest that we had planned, Julian Linnell, wasn't able to make it. She was going to come and talk with us about the capital investment plan, and hopefully she'll be able to make it to the July meeting. And so what we often do is go through the presentations to the board of directors and see what's relevant to capital investment there. I will add, we did a little bit of a preliminary read of the regulations for the fare evasion, and we did key in on alternatives, to fines, and it wasn't clear what those are. And at the meeting that came up too, and it seems like it's more along the lines of forgiveness, or at least not ticketing, as opposed to ticketing, and also at that meeting, they were people were generally happy that it was decriminalized. And so people now get a ticket as opposed to, and it's a ticket as opposed to getting a record. So even though there would be enforcement that might increase the number of interactions with enforcement, at least that interaction isn't one that leads to a criminal record. So we'll see what happens. And just kind of quickly running down some of the decks that we looked at. We touched briefly on the collective bargaining agreement, and it was of note that one of the things is for the supervisors of the buses to now be paid equal to the supervisors of the rail, and seems like 453 is going to get 2.5% raises over the life of the contract. Let's see. We actually had a fuel hedge deck again, and we talked about that previously. And so they have put a contract. I think the contract's out to bid, or the RFP is out to bid for the brokerage house or investment firm that's going to handle the fuel hedge. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of that, especially with fuel prices so high. And I said previously that it'd almost be better to wait a little bit until they come down before putting a hedge on, because chances are, I don't. The way the hedges work is that you pretty much try to brace yourself against future increases, so that if prices go down, you do lose on the hedge, but what you gain is in the predictability, what you're going to pay. But I think in this environment, I don't know how much I would hedge just now, but hey, they don't pay me to do this, so I'm just kind of spouting off as the co-chair of the subcommittee and not as someone on the board of directors making the decision about what to do next on this. So one thing we didn't talk about, but I had wanted to talk about it, was the climate resiliency plan. And I'll suggest that if you have time to take a look at that deck. It was presented at the board of directors meeting on the 26th, I think. And what I like about it is the decrease in carbon usage, especially on buses. Looks like they're aiming towards zero gas usage by 2050. And so I'm kind of proud of the team for doing that. And they're really going, I think, towards all electric as opposed to hybrid, which would give you much less reduction in the use of carbon for fueling the buses. So yeah.
Len, is that something that you'd like me to pull up for talking about it now?
Well, I'm done with talking about it, but if you want it, that's fine. So but we can talk about it more at the next meeting. So I'm pretty much done.
Okay.
At this point.
All right.
That sounds right to me, Len.
Want me to pull up the
No.
marketing operations?
We can if you just send. I can look it up. But if somebody wants to send out a link, that'd be great too.
Oh yeah.
We don't have to do it now.
Okay. Yeah. Shall I go on to the next subcommittee? Share the notes for that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Here we are right here. Hopefully that is legible for everybody. Again, this is literally my my notes. I think the biggest operational discussion was talking about some of the operational aspects with Jonathan, talking about what's involved when there is a layover area. it's not all bad news. I mean, case in point right here, or I mentioned in Union Square already, there's an access to restrooms for MBTA operators, and there seems to be an increasing understanding between the MBTA and adjacent property owners that comfort stations for operators are a critical part of allowing service to be designed as best serves the community. I mean, in other words, you can't have a route that will terminate somewhere where there is not access to facilities for the operator. So if the MBTA can team up with private developers or even the municipality to provide access to a restroom, that opens up possibilities for the routes to be terminating from those points. I think Jonathan cited a case where at one point in the past, a bus route layover spot was provided with a porta-john, and the operators were very unhappy about that, to put it mildly. But I think that seems to be something that is to be avoided, not necessarily at all costs, because costs factor into it, but I'm personally, speaking for myself, I'm very encouraged to hear that developers in those areas where there's route planning going on are being brought into the mix to say, can we give access to a restroom? Some of them, like the one in Union Square, is key access. So it's not open to the public, but the bus operators do have access to it. The other things, go ahead.
Let me just tag on, if I could, for a second. I always noticed that at the old Leechmere, which is now not functioning, that even though there weren't public restrooms, the bus drivers almost all got off, and they'd take a break.
I've seen that too. Absolutely, it's an important part of, being a human bus operator. I don't know if we'll ever have autonomous vehicles, but certainly until that point, you have to provide for rest facilities.
Well, it's
also just getting out of the seat for 3 minutes or 5 minutes.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, Len. Yes.
No, unless you're
forever is a long time ever.
The end of the species, like in the next 15 years. I hope we live long enough. Man, wouldn't it be awful? Like, you got me going. I'll stop.
One other thing to highlight before we leave this summary of the minutes was that the Cabot Red Line reconstruction was significantly affected in a setback because the joint venture called LMH Lane Cabot Yard went bankrupt. It's not worth going into now, but up until that was cited in the subcommittee meeting, I didn't realize that was the reason why the Cabot Yard and maintenance facility improvements are so set back in terms of schedule. Very good reason. When the contractor goes bankrupt, everything kind of grinds to a halt. I guess I can leave it there.
It's a major contractor too. Clearly it's not only the MBTA that's affected by this, so.
True.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out more about what happened there. It kind of reminds me of that.
So Roger, your question about, are we involved in the question of branding? Not as yet, but it's, knowing now that from hearing Melissa say that it's not set in stone that it'll be a T. Yeah, I will bring that up at our next subcommittee, because we have been involved in branding and marketing issues in the past. I mean, as you would guess, Roger, the O in ROC is oversight, and that means that we are almost entirely operating after the fact. We're not like the MBTA board where we're setting a direction. We are coming at things after the fact. But yeah, we have been in the past. We've been in discussions with folks at the agency well in advance. And that even goes out to things like vehicle design. We were given a private tour, for example, of the prototype of the Hyundai Rotem bi-level coaches. When back when the only bi-level coaches were from Kawasaki, and the bid had been given to Hyundai Rotem, and it was a relatively new design and a new vendor. We were brought over to North Station and given a private tour of that mock-up. So I mean, we've been in early phases of a lot of projects, including actually one of the low floor bus designs. I've forgotten when that was. A couple of years ago. Okay, so we're at almost 10 of 7. What shall we turn to next? Any new business, old business, external meetings?
So I'm wondering, I don't know why, but I'm wondering if we should put it on the agenda, which could be fall, to check back in with the real estate with the real estate group that does the outside contracts for development in connection with T properties, because I'm seeing a fair number. Well, there are some new proposals for co-development on T property, and I think we haven't checked in with them for a while, not since maybe the one that was in years ago. We looked at the Big Quincy development, but I think more recently we looked at one out in Newton near the highway, but we haven't checked in with the land guys in a long time.
Sure. Maybe you want them at a full rock meeting or a CIF meeting.
Whatever folks think, and it doesn't have to be immediately. I'm just thinking sometime before Christmas, we should probably get back in touch with those folks and hear what they're up to. I've been seeing stories in the Globe. That's what's kind of reminding me that they're part of the mix.
Well, you know what I generally say when you make these kind of suggestions, right, Mike?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's all right.
Okay. Make it so. Yeah, I'm up for it.
Yep. Yep.
And if you want to happen to CF, I mean, you know how I am with the agenda of those meetings. Just tell me what you want on the agenda. I'm also happy to put it there.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And I may have missed one. Very occasionally, I have to travel for some of the research. But other than that, I don't think I missed too many meetings.
Sure. And well, I mean, and generally the meetings, I'll let you know what's coming up in the following months. At any given meeting, you can let me know if you want something on the agenda for the next month. But even in between then, if something comes up, you let me know, and I can usually work it in.
Yep.
And for these meetings, of course, you have the person lined up. We generally go with them. All right. Well, you want to give us some time back, Stefan? I'm not hearing Stefan. Are you still talking?
Nope. I had my mic off, hardware mic off.
Gotcha.
I think you didn't hear me say, Wig, the same thing goes for marketing operations communications subcommittee. If you think of someone, just let me know, and I will I will make contact to them if there's a topic. Wait, when you were talking about the real estate, MBTA real estate folks, you mentioned a Globe article. You remember what day that was?
Yeah, no, I run through so many things some days that
That's okay.
it falls too far back on the stack. But
Within the last week or two?
yeah, within the last week or two, I saw an article. That's what made me think about it.
I'll find it. I subscribe to the Globe Online, so I'll look for it. So thanks for that idea.
And it honestly, it could have been the same. It might have been the one that ends across the highway from the golf course, the big golf course, because that one has come up a couple times before. It might have been that one. I'm not sure.
I will browse for it. We're about 6 up. I heard Len say, should we give folks a few minutes back? Sure, I'm game. There's no one watching on YouTube right now, so I don't think we'd be cutting off anyone from public comments because we advertised a 6:50 to 7 o'clock public comment period. So I don't think we were shortchanging anyone if we stopped 5 minutes early.
Stefan, one other thing, I noticed I noticed your correspondence about data and with James. I think it's a really good idea to put us on as solid long-term footing as we can. It doesn't have to be immediate, but if James and you can, think about that stuff and come up with a near permanent solution.
That's not for us. That's not for the Rocks website. This is for Stefan's application or the.
I'll extrapolate from what Wig's saying, and I think we have neglected our website, our committee's website strategy for a while. Just in terms of who can update it, who manages it. We don't have a lot of redundancy in terms of who does the care and feeding. Go ahead, Len.
It's all James.
Right, exactly. And anytime that you've got a resource that's used and relied upon by many people, if it's only in the hands of one person, that's a single point of failure, as we call, as we say in the IT industry. And it's no. I don't want to cast aspersions on James, but having anything that's an important resource managed by just one person, not optimal.
Well, look. You have done a phenomenal job, and the connection with James has been very efficient too. I just want to put a vote behind any thinking that you guys do.
I mean, there might not need to be any changes other than, between Len and I and maybe Jacob, we should probably all put our heads together and see if we all want to share the access credentials so that we can all get in there. Again, the case of the proverbial getting hit by a bus, God forbid, but we should have some fallbacks.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fine with that. And the less I need to do the website, the better. Just because it's not like I don't care about it or have the aptitude for it. I just don't have the time to deal with it. And so, and what I was saying about it's all James, it's like I don't have the credentials to the website anymore. I mean, if I do, I'd have to dig them up. I'd imagine James has changed them. But really, what Wade was talking about was in reference to what you had sent.
Yeah, you're right. That's what spurred me to think about it.
And
absolutely
that's
correct.
His application, which I imagine you have only access to, right, Stefan?
Oh, at the moment, yes, and I'm trying to remedy that. As I'm finding out that it is actually a resource that's quite used. But I have some connections and some feelers out into my work posting. Roger, we're talking in very roundabout terms about a not related to MBTA, not related to Rider Oversight Committee, a couple of transit applications that I wrote that are looking for a new a hosting platform home. And it got me thinking about our committee website and, what are the capabilities of it? Who can do what, where, when?
Gotcha.
It's kind of nuts and bolts. We're talking about how the sausage is being made.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry that Jacob and Craig weren't here to meet you, Roger. It's great to have you on board for the first time. Hopefully, this won't be the only time.
I agreed. Yeah, hope I can come back. Great to meet you all finally.
As a matter of fact, I'll plant an idea in your head, Roger, and this is no obligation, but since the survey aspect, like what you're describing as what your team does, and you're managing a team of multiple staffers, that's critical. That's so critical that I'm thinking maybe at a future meeting, if you're up for it, you could actually talk about your process methodology, what goes into surveying, what goes into the work that you do. What's a day in the life of one of your staffers?
Okay.
That might be very enlightening for us.
Yeah, very interesting.
No obligation.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, we're coming up on 7 o'clock. It is 7 o'clock.
Right.
Unless anyone's got anything else. Carl, Wig, Len, Roger, anything else?
Nope.
All right. Good night.
Okay,
No,
cool.
thanks.
See you
Thank
next
you
month.
all.
Bye.
See you next time.
Take care.